The first time Soraya Bennett realized her marriage had become a business decision, her husband was standing 12 feet away from her, thanking another woman for saving the company Soraya had helped build. The event was supposed to be their 12th anniversary dinner. At least that was what Callahan Rourke's assistant had written in the calendar invite. Private celebration, Foundry Yard preview, 7:30 p.m., spouses included. But by the time Soraya arrived at the renovated rail warehouse on Atlanta's west side, the place looked less like a marriage celebration and more like a press rollout. There were investor badges on lanyards, a printed seating chart taped behind the check-in table, and a press kit on every chair with Bryn Ashcroft's name placed directly beneath Callahan's. Soraya's name was not on the first page. It was not on the second. A young coordinator in a black blazer looked down at her tablet and said, "Mrs. Rourke, you're seated near the community partners tonight." She said it politely, like the mistake had already been approved by someone above her. Soraya looked across the room and saw Callahan near the scale model of the Foundry Yard, the 50-acre redevelopment project everyone in Atlanta business media had been talking about for months. He wore the navy suit she had picked up from the tailor that morning. Bryn stood beside him in a white structured dress, touching his sleeve as she introduced him to a city council aide, a bank president, and two reporters from a regional business magazine. Callahan saw Soraya. For half a second, his face changed, not with guilt exactly, but with the irritation of a man whose private problem had walked into his public moment. He excused himself, crossed the concrete floor, and stopped just close enough to keep people from hearing. "Can we not do this here?" he said. Soraya stared at him. "Do what?" He glanced toward Bryn. "You knew tonight was important." "I thought tonight was ours." He breathed out through his nose, already tired, already defensive. "It is. It's also bigger than that." That was how he said it now, whenever he needed her to swallow something that hurt. Bigger than that. Bigger than dinner alone. Bigger than the missed counseling session. Bigger than the hotel receipt she had found in his jacket pocket and never asked about, because she was afraid the answer would make her leave before she was ready. Across the room, Bryn laughed at something Callahan's mother said, then looked over at Soraya with a smile that did not apologize. On the big screen behind the stage, a slideshow began. Early renderings, neighborhood maps, community meeting photos cropped so tightly that Soraya's face had been cut out of two of them. The caption read, "Rourke Meridian's vision for a new Atlanta." Soraya remembered the church basement where she had first drawn that vision on butcher paper with a borrowed marker. She remembered the barbershop owner who would not speak to Callahan until Soraya sat with him for 40 minutes and listened. She remembered the email chain where she had warned the company not to call residents obstacles, and the file that disappeared from the shared drive 3 weeks later. Then Callahan stepped onto the stage. The room settled. Phones lifted. The livestream light turned red. He smiled the kind of smile that made investors trust him and employees forgive him. "Tonight is personal," he said, looking into the cameras before he looked at his wife. 12 years ago, I learned what partnership could mean." Soraya's chest tightened, because for one foolish second, she thought he might still choose truth. Then he turned toward Bryn. "And this year, I learned that the future sometimes arrives through someone brave enough to reimagine everything." The applause started slowly, uncertain at first, then louder when Bryn walked up beside him. Someone near Soraya whispered, "Is that his new partner?" Another voice answered, "Looks like more than business." Soraya kept her hands folded in her lap. Her phone buzzed with a text from Callahan's sister. "I'm sorry. I didn't know he would do it like this." If you have ever sat in a room where everyone seemed to understand your humiliation before you did, then you know why Soraya did not move right away. She needed one breath to stay herself. One breath to remember she was not the woman they had reduced her to. On stage, Bryn adjusted Callahan's lapel in front of 3 cameras, and he let her. Soraya looked down at the press kit again, at the missing name, at the version of history printed clean enough for investors. Then she reached for her wedding ring, turned it once, and stopped. Not yet. They could have the room for one more minute. They did not know what she owned. Soraya did not leave the warehouse right away. She walked past the check-in table, past the coordinator who suddenly found something urgent on her tablet, and stopped near the service hallway where the noise from the room thinned into the hum of ice machines and staff radios. Her phone showed 3 missed calls from Callahan's office number, not his cell. That was how their marriage worked now. If it was personal, he delayed it. If it was public, someone scheduled it. Earlier that morning, before the event, they had sat across from each other at the long kitchen island in their house in Buckhead, with two untouched plates between them and a stack of courier envelopes near his briefcase. Soraya had made eggs because she still did small things out of habit, even when love had begun to feel like a chore both of them were avoiding. Callahan had been scrolling through a media schedule on his phone, approving a 6:30 television hit, a magazine interview, and a prep call with Bryn at noon. "You are not eating?" she had asked. He had looked up like she had interrupted a meeting. "I have the council briefing in 40 minutes. We have counseling at 11. His jaw tightened, just enough. "Can we move that? Today is bad." Soraya had set her fork down. Every day has been bad for 3 months. He did not answer. Instead, he forwarded an email to someone named Lila in communications and said, "Bryn needs the revised talking points before lunch." The name stayed in the kitchen longer than it should have. On the counter, Soraya's anniversary card sat in a brown paper bag from a stationery store on Peachtree Road. She had written it the night before, then crossed out the line about still believing in them because it felt too much like begging. When Callahan's mother called, he answered on speaker without warning. "Mom, I have 2 minutes." His mother asked what Soraya was wearing that night, then corrected herself and asked whether Bryn had approved the photo backdrop. Soraya looked at Callahan. He looked at the refrigerator door, where an old magnet still held a postcard from their first apartment, back when Rourke Meridian had 3 employees and 1 leased printer. "I will handle it," he said. "Not Soraya will be there. Not this is our anniversary. Just, I will handle it." Now, standing in the hallway behind the Foundry Yard event space, Soraya opened her messages and saw the last text she had sent him at 2:14 p.m. "Are we arriving together tonight? Or should I meet you there?" It still had no reply. Below it was a company-wide email from Rourke Meridian, sent at 5:06 p.m., announcing Bryn Ashcroft as strategic image lead for the next era of growth. The attached press kit included a timeline of the project. Soraya tapped it once, then again, hoping she had misread the first page. She had not. The church listening sessions were listed as executive outreach. The small business protections were listed as Callahan Rourke's Community First Framework. Even the phrase she had written on a legal pad during a tense meeting with residents, "Build with them, not over them," appeared in bold under Bryn's media notes. A staff member came through the hallway carrying a tray of name cards and slowed when she recognized Soraya. "Mrs. Rourke, do you need someone to get Mr. Rourke?" she asked. There was pity in the question, but also fear, the kind employees had when they knew too much and had mortgages to pay. Soraya shook her head. "No, he knows where I am." The staff member nodded and hurried away. A second later, Soraya heard laughter from inside the room, followed by applause. Her phone rang again. This time it was Callahan's cell. She stared at his name until the screen went dark. Then a voicemail appeared, 8 seconds long. She did not play it. Instead, she opened her email, searched Venet Civic Trust, and found the message from Marcellus Dade sent 2 weeks earlier, the one she had avoided because answering it would make everything real. Subject line, "Final approval authority still sits with you." Soraya read it once, then looked back toward the room where her husband was letting another woman stand in the place Soraya had earned. For the first time that night, she did not feel replaced. She felt underestimated. Soraya did not answer Marcellus right away. She stood in the service hallway with her thumb hovering over the email, telling herself there had to be a reasonable explanation, because that was what she had done for years. Maybe Callahan had let the communications team simplify the timeline. Maybe Bryn had copied language without knowing where it came from. Maybe the missing credit was a mistake made by some overworked associate who had never seen the first version of the project. Then Soraya opened the attachment in the company press kit, and the excuse fell apart page by page. The slide deck was called Foundry Yard, Reclaiming Atlanta's Industrial Spine. She knew the title because she had written it in 2018 on a 12-slide PowerPoint made on her old laptop at 2 in the morning, after Callahan came home furious from a failed investor dinner. Back then, the company had only $38,000 left in its operating account, and the first lender had passed because, in their words, the neighborhood risk profile was too complicated. Soraya had rebuilt the pitch herself. She added foot traffic maps from the Beltline corridor, census data, small business retention projections, and a page showing how below-market commercial leases could keep legacy shops alive while still producing steady returns. She was not perfect in that room. She had talked too fast. She had snapped at Callahan afterward when he called her numbers too sentimental. She had apologized first because she wanted the marriage to survive the pressure. But 3 weeks later, at a breakfast meeting with 2 investors from Charlotte, Callahan used her deck almost word for word. He wore confidence better than she did. That was the part she had tried to accept. Now, on the event screen inside the Foundry Yard, Slide 7 appeared with Bryn's logo in the corner and Callahan's name at the bottom. Build with them, not over them. Soraya's sentence. Bryn's formatting. Callahan's applause. Near the hallway entrance, an older project manager named Curtis Bell saw Soraya staring at the screen and slowed down. Curtis had been with Rourke Meridian before the company could afford matching office chairs. He looked embarrassed, then stepped closer. For what it's worth, he said under his breath, some of us remember who wrote that. Soraya almost laughed, but it came out wrong. Remembering did not make the credits. Curtis glanced toward the stage. No, it did not. That small honesty hurt more than the lie, because it proved she had not imagined being erased. Her phone buzzed with an email alert from a former city planning consultant, forwarded by mistake or maybe by conscience. The subject line read, Bryn revised origin story. Attached was a marked-up media backgrounder from 2 days earlier. In the comments, Bryn had written, remove spouse references. Focus on Callahan as sole visionary. Cleaner narrative for national press. Soraya read the line twice. Then she saw Callahan's reply beneath it. Fine. Keep it tight. For a moment, her body reacted before her mind did. Her hand went cold around the phone. She thought about walking into the room and asking him, in front of everyone, whether a clean story was worth a dirty marriage. But then another memory stopped her. The old conference room with the broken thermostat, Callahan gripping her hand under the table while the first investor finally said yes. He had loved her once, or at least he had needed her in a way that felt close enough. That was the cruel part. Betrayal did not erase all the good years. It made her question whether she had misunderstood them. Inside the event space, Bryn took the microphone and said, the future of this project has always been about disciplined storytelling. Soraya looked down at the email from Marcellus again. Final approval authority still sits with you. That was the first small turn of the night. Not revenge. Not yet. Just a document. A date. A legal structure Callahan had forgotten because he never thought the woman he overlooked would read the fine print he had built his empire on. By the time Soraya stepped back into the main room, the event had shifted from awkward to official. A publicist had moved Bryn's chair to the front row beside Callahan's mother, and Soraya's place card, the one that should have read Soraya Venet Rourke, had been turned face down on a table near the side entrance. No one announced it. No one had to. That was how people with money made decisions hurt more. They let the room adjust around you until your absence looked intentional. On stage, Bryn was answering questions from a business reporter in a gray suit who kept glancing at his notes. So you are the one shaping the new identity of Rourke Meridian, he said, holding the microphone toward her. Bryn smiled like she had practiced restraint in a mirror. I would say Callahan had the vision. I helped give it language people could trust. A few investors nodded. One of them, a man Soraya had met twice at community finance meetings, saw her standing near the aisle and quickly looked down at his program. Curtis Bell did the same, but not fast enough to hide the embarrassment on his face. Then the reporter turned toward Callahan. Your anniversary is tonight too, correct? Big personal milestone, big company milestone. How does it feel to have someone beside you who understands both the brand and the pressure? There it was. Not a shouted insult. Not a scene anyone could cleanly condemn. Just the wrong woman being treated as the right one, while the actual wife stood 20 feet away with her name missing from the printed story. Callahan's eyes found Soraya for a second. She waited for him to fix it. He could have said, my wife is here. He could have said, Soraya was part of this from the beginning. He could have said one ordinary sentence and pulled the room back from cruelty. Instead, he adjusted his cuff and gave the answer that protected the launch. Bryn has been essential, he said. This project needed a sharper public voice, and she stepped in when the company needed clarity. Soraya felt the words land, not as surprise, but as confirmation. Bryn placed one hand on the back of Callahan's chair. It was subtle enough that no press photo would look improper, clear enough that everyone in the room understood the message. A junior staffer near the media table whispered, Should we swap the captions on the live stream? Another answered, leave it. Communications approved it. Soraya heard both of them. So did Ansel Whitcomb, the CFO, who stopped beside the stage steps with a folder under his arm and looked as if he wanted to be somewhere else. Callahan walked down from the platform during a short break and reached Soraya before anyone else could. You need to stop standing there like that, he said under his breath. Like what? Like I did something to you. She almost smiled, because the sentence was so careful. You let her take my seat. He looked toward the cameras, then back at her. It is a seating issue. Do not make it bigger. You made it bigger when you let a reporter call her your partner. That is not what he said. You know what he meant. Callahan's face tightened, not with remorse, but with panic that she might say the wrong thing near the wrong microphone. Before he could answer, Bryn approached with 2 press badges hanging from her fingers. Callahan, the Atlanta Business Ledger wants 5 minutes. They are asking for both of us. She paused, as if noticing Soraya only then. Soraya, I hope tonight is not uncomfortable. These events get messy. It was a polished sentence, almost kind if someone wanted to misunderstand it. Soraya looked at the badges. One read Callahan Rourke, founder and chief executive officer. The other read Bryn Ashcroft, strategic partner. There was no badge for Soraya. Not guest, not spouse, not founder of the trust that held the final approval authority. She turned to Callahan and waited again, one last time. He did not correct it. He only said, we will talk at home. And that was the moment the marriage stopped being private. Not because Soraya raised her voice, but because every person watching saw the same thing she did. Callahan had chosen the version of his life that photographed better, and he expected his wife to stand quietly outside the frame. Soraya left through the service exit because it was the only door without a photographer standing near it. The security camera above the loading bay blinked red as she walked past the stacked rental chairs and the folding tables still wrapped in plastic. For a second, she hated that even her leaving would be recorded from a bad angle, with her clutching her phone and trying not to look like a woman who had just been removed from her own life. Her car was parked on the far side of the warehouse lot, between a catering van and a city inspector's SUV. She sat behind the wheel for almost 6 minutes without turning the engine on. Her hands were steady when she unlocked her phone, then not steady when she saw Callahan's message. Where are you? Do not embarrass me tonight. She typed, you already did that yourself. Then she deleted it. She typed, I am done. Then she deleted that too, because done was a feeling, not a plan, and Soraya had learned the hard way that feelings did not protect bank accounts, signatures, or names on documents. She called Marcellus Dade first. He answered on the 4th ring, with traffic noise behind him. Soraya? I need to know what I can legally take from company systems, she said. Her voice sounded too calm to be hers. Nothing from restricted drives, he said immediately. Personal files you created, personal email, copies of agreements where you are a named party, trust documents, anything already in your possession. Do not access anything under his credentials. Do not forward yourself company confidential material. I know. I am saying it anyway. She closed her eyes. Say it again. So he did, and she wrote it down in the Notes app under a title that made her feel a little sick, leaving checklist. At the top of the list, she added, call bank. Call attorney. Change phone plan. Pack only personal items. Do not argue in writing. By the time she reached the Buckhead house, Callahan had called twice and sent one more text. We will discuss this after the event. She almost laughed at the word discuss. The house was lit the way the housekeeper always left it on event nights, with the foyer lamp on and the kitchen counters clear except for the anniversary card still in its brown paper bag. Soraya took the stairs without turning on the main lights. In the bedroom, she pulled one carry-on suitcase from the closet and packed like someone evacuating a hotel, not ending a marriage. 2 pairs of jeans, 3 blouses, running shoes, the navy folder with her birth certificate, passport, and the old operating agreement for Venet Civic Trust. From the bathroom drawer, she took the medication she actually used and left behind the expensive perfume Callahan bought after missing her birthday dinner. On the dresser sat the jewelry tray he had given her after their first major financing closed. She touched the wedding ring on her hand, turned it once, then removed it and placed it inside the blank anniversary card. She did not write a note. The empty card said enough. Her phone buzzed again, this time with a call from her mother in Savannah. Soraya answered and said nothing for 2 breaths. Her mother did not ask for details first. She only said, "Baby, are you safe?" That nearly broke her. "Yes." "Do you need me to come up?" "Not tonight. I need you to not tell Aunt Rochelle yet." "Then I will not." Soraya looked around the bedroom at the framed photograph from their courthouse signing, the dry cleaning receipt on Callahan's chair, the cuff links he had thrown there that morning. "I think I am leaving him," she said. Her mother was quiet, but not shocked. "Then leave with your papers." Downstairs, Soraya logged into her personal laptop, not the company one, and downloaded copies of the trust documents from her own cloud folder. She changed the password on her personal email, froze one joint credit card after confirming there was no balance she did not recognize, and scheduled a consultation with a family law attorney for 9:15 the next morning. She did not drain accounts. She did not touch his files. She did not break anything. The most dramatic thing she did was place her Rourke Meridian access card on the kitchen island beside the anniversary card and the ring. At 11:48 p.m., the front door opened. Callahan came in still wearing his event badge, his face tight with the anger of a man who thought the night had gone badly because his wife had refused to cooperate. "You left," he said, as if that was the offense. Soraya stood near the back door with her suitcase handle in her hand. "Yes." He looked at the access card, then the ring. "This is childish." She nodded once, not because she agreed, but because she was too tired to teach him the difference between drama and a boundary. "You need to sleep somewhere else tonight," she said. "It is my house too." "Then I will go." For the first time, he looked uncertain. Not sorry. Not yet. Just aware that the conversation was moving without his permission. "Soraya, do not do this." Her phone buzzed before she could answer. It was an email from Marcellus, sent with one attachment and a single line. "You need to read Section 9 before morning." She opened the document in the driveway, with her suitcase in the passenger seat, and saw the clause Callahan had forgotten existed. Callahan did not read Section 9 until after 2 in the morning, and by then he had already sent 4 messages that made him look worse than he understood. The first said, "You are overreacting." The second said, "We have investors watching." The third said, "Do not talk to anyone until we speak." The fourth was just her name, sent at 1:37 a.m., when the house had become too clean, too large, and too obviously missing the one person who knew where everything was. Section 9 was not long. It was a community approval clause tied to the central parcel of the foundry yard, the old freight office, and the 2 blocks around it. Any material change in project branding, tenant protections, or public benefit structure required written confirmation from Venice Civic Trust. Not Rourke Meridian. Not Callahan. Not Bryn's communications team. The trust. And the trust's managing signatory was Soraya. By 8:05 the next morning, the first investor email arrived. It came from a private equity partner in Charlotte who usually opened with golf jokes and ended with exclamation points. This one had neither. "Callahan, we need clarity on approval authority before funds are released. Please advise by noon." At 8:22, the city council aide postponed the Thursday site walk. At 8:40, Ansel Whitcomb stepped into Callahan's office with a printed copy of the clause and said, "We flagged this last year." Callahan looked up from his laptop. "No, you flagged a community optics issue." "No," Ansel said, not loudly. "Soraya flagged a legal issue. You told us to move it to after close." The conference room at 9 was full, but nobody wanted to speak first. The finance team had a red line across the cash flow chart showing a delayed draw of $18 million. Leasing had 2 unsigned letters of intent from restaurant tenants who wanted assurance that the project would not become a public fight. Communications had a social media report showing the launch clips underperforming except for one 15-second video where Bryn adjusted Callahan's lapel and Soraya could be seen standing at the edge of the frame. The comments were not cruel in the way Callahan expected. They were worse because they were specific. Who is the woman they cropped out of the project photos? Why is his wife standing alone at their anniversary event? This brand used to feel connected to the neighborhood. Now it feels like a campaign. Bryn sat 2 seats away, scrolling through the report with a pen between her fingers. "We can reposition," she said. "Make it about modernization. Less personal, more institutional." Ansel looked at her. "The issue is not wording. Wording is how issues become manageable." Callahan snapped, "Enough." But even he heard how thin that sounded. By noon, A regional business site posted a short article with a careful headline asking why the Foundry Yard's community partner had not signed final approval. It mentioned Venice Civic Trust once. That was all it took. A lender requested backup documents. A council member's office asked whether the anniversary event had been used as a private brand launch. A junior architect emailed Curtis Bell asking whether they should pause updated renderings until legal confirmed the tenant mix. One of the project coordinators resigned before lunch, with a two-line email that said she was no longer comfortable being assigned to communications cleanup around community commitments. Callahan read it twice, irritated by the tone, then more irritated because he could not tell whether she was brave or simply young enough to think jobs were easy to replace. He went searching for Soraya in the only places he still had access to. He typed her name into the company drive and found old folders he had not opened in years. Church listening sessions, small business retention model, Foundry first pitch, Venice notes. Most of the files were locked or archived under her personal account, but one presentation still opened. The first slide had no logo, just a date from 2018 and a title he recognized too late. On slide 4, in the speaker notes, Soraya had written, "Do not sell this as rescue. They do not need saving. They need leverage." Callahan sat back. He remembered mocking that line because it sounded too cautious for investors. Then he remembered using it later, polished and shortened, during a panel where people applauded him for empathy. He called Soraya. The number did not go through. He tried again and got a standard message saying the subscriber was unavailable. He called her mother next, a thing he had not done without Soraya arranging it in years. Her mother answered with no warmth. "Callahan, is she with you? That is not my information to give. I need to speak to my wife." "Then you should have spoken to her when she was in the room." The line ended before he could make his voice sound reasonable. Across his office, Bryn stood and gathered her tablet, her press folder, and the clean version of the story she had built for him. "I have a call with the ledger," she said. "We should not be photographed together until this settles." Callahan looked at her, and for the first time, the spotlight around her seemed less like loyalty and more like a service agreement nearing its cancellation clause. Then Ansel appeared at the door again, pale around the mouth, holding his phone. "The city moved tomorrow's hearing up," he said, "and Soraya's name is on the agenda." Soraya did not wake up the next morning feeling powerful. She woke up in a short-term rental near Decatur with a stiff neck, a half-unpacked suitcase, and a banking app that made her feel foolish for ever confusing access with security. Her personal checking account was fine, but fine was not the same as free. The retainer invoice from Marcellus was sitting in her email before 7 a.m., along with a message from the family law attorney confirming a consultation and asking for tax returns, insurance information, and any prenuptial agreement she had signed. Soraya stared at the list for a long time. She had signed things years ago because Callahan's lawyers called them standard, because she was newly married, because she did not want to look suspicious of the man she loved. Now every old signature felt like a door she had helped close on herself. By 9:30, she was in a conference room above a credit union on Memorial Drive, trying to explain to a loan officer why Venice Civic Trust needed a modest operating line to hire a planner, a legal assistant, and a part-time communications consultant before the city hearing. The loan officer was kind, but careful. She asked for 2 years of independent revenue, a board resolution, and proof that Soraya was not simply reacting to a marital dispute. "I am not asking that personally," the woman said, lowering her voice. "It is what underwriting will ask." Soraya nodded, even though the words stung. "I understand." In the parking lot, she sat in her car with the printed application on her lap and almost called Callahan. Not to go back. Not exactly. Just to hear someone say he could fix the part of this that involved money, because he had always been good at making problems disappear when the problem had a price. Her thumb hovered over his name until she remembered his text from the night before. "Do not embarrass me tonight." She put the phone face down and cried for less than a minute, angry at herself for even wanting the easy door. Then she wiped her face with a napkin from a drive-through bag and drove to the old brick office building Curtis Bell had mentioned years ago, the one above a family-owned print shop near Edgewood Avenue. The leasing agent arrived 20 minutes late and looked surprised when Soraya asked about the smallest unit, not the renovated suite facing the street. "It is only 480 square feet," he said. "The air conditioning is loud." Bathroom is down the hall. Does the door lock? She asked. Yes. Then show me. The room smelled like printer ink and old carpet. One window faced a parking lot. The ceiling tiles did not match, but the rent was lower than her car payment, and the lease was month to month with a 2-month deposit. Soraya took photos, measured the wall with a tape app on her phone, and wrote a rough budget on the back of the rental packet. Desk, 2 chairs, printer, filing cabinet, liability insurance, website domain, parking. The numbers looked ugly. They also looked possible. That afternoon, the first rejection came from a neighborhood preservation group that had once praised her in private. Their director sent an email saying they respected her work but could not risk being seen as taking sides against Rourke Meridian. An hour later, a podcast producer called and asked if she would come on to talk about betrayal, race, and billionaires. Soraya asked whether they wanted to discuss land use agreements or just her marriage. The producer paused too long. Honestly, both would perform well. Then I am not your guest, Soraya said, and ended the call before she could talk herself into needing the exposure. By 6, she was sitting on the floor of the empty office with a laptop, a prepaid wireless hotspot, and a turkey sandwich she had forgotten to eat. Marcellus had sent a draft agenda for the hearing. Her mother had texted a photo of a small overnight bag by her front door, just in case. Curtis had sent one message. If you need a witness to the early meetings, I will tell the truth. Soraya read that 3 times. The small win came from a woman named Devika Lorne, owner of a daycare 2 blocks from the Foundry Yard site. Devika called after business hours, with children's voices in the background, and said she had heard Soraya might be advising tenants directly. I cannot pay Rourke money, Devika said, but I can pay something. I need help reading this relocation addendum before I sign away my parking spaces. Soraya opened a blank contract template, then stopped because her hands were shaking again. Not from fear this time. From the strange shock of being asked for her work under her own name. I can help, she said. I will send you a simple engagement letter tonight. It was not a major deal. It would not scare Callahan's investors. It would barely cover the office deposit. But when Soraya typed Venet Urban Strategies at the top of the document, she did not feel like someone's abandoned wife. She felt like a woman beginning the slow, expensive work of becoming reachable to herself again. Callahan saw Soraya again inside a city-owned conference center near Centennial Olympic Park, not at a party, not in a room built for gossip, but at a regional development summit where every table had bottled water, printed agendas, and people checking email between panels. 6 months had passed, long enough for Rourke Meridian to survive publicly and bleed privately. The Foundry Yard closing had been postponed twice. Bryn had resigned in a statement that called her departure a planned transition, though Callahan knew she had already taken a brand advisory role with a healthcare startup in Nashville. Her last text to him had been clean and professional. I think the story has moved beyond my ability to shape it. That was her way of leaving without being seen leaving. Callahan arrived with Ansel and 2 lawyers, expecting another panel about urban revitalization and municipal finance. Then he opened the agenda and saw her name printed under a session titled Community Leverage in Private Development. Soraya Venet, founder, Venet Urban Strategies. Not Mrs. Rourke, not spouse, not community liaison. Her own name, attached to her own company, in 12-point type on a government-issued program. It should not have hit him that hard, but it did. He found her 10 minutes later near the registration table, signing a 1-page consulting agreement with Devika Lorne and a representative from a local grocery cooperative. Soraya wore a charcoal blazer he did not recognize, with a conference badge clipped straight to the pocket. Her hair was pulled back, not for effect, but because she was working. A young planner stood beside her holding a folder labeled Tenant Protection Review, and a city staffer waited to ask her a question instead of asking him. That was the part Callahan could not look away from. People were not praising her to wound him. They were simply treating her as useful, prepared, and necessary. Soraya glanced up and saw him. Her expression changed, but only slightly, the way someone reacts to a former address on an old envelope. Callahan, she said. Soraya. He hated how careful his own voice sounded. Ansel stepped back, pretending to check a message. For a moment, all the noise around them became ordinary and inconvenient. Coffee cups being stacked, a microphone test from the next room, someone asking where breakout session B was. Callahan looked at the document in her hand. You are consulting with the cooperative now? For a pilot lease review. Small contract. That is good. The words came out flat, not because he did not mean them, but because he did not know how to say them without admitting what else was true. She had built something without his building, without his staff, without his last name doing the heavy lifting. He noticed the scuffed corner of her laptop bag, the cheap ballpoint pen tucked into her folder, the absence of the wedding ring he kept expecting to see even after his own lawyers had received the separation papers. I tried calling, he said. I changed my number. I know. Then why say it? He looked down, almost smiling at himself, but there was no humor in it. Because I did. Soraya capped her pen. The lawyers have what they need. I was not talking about lawyers. She held his eyes for 1 second longer than she would have 6 months ago. I know that too. A conference volunteer approached her with a clipboard. Ms. Vennett, they are ready for you in room C. Ms. Vennett. Callahan heard it land between them with more force than any accusation. Soraya nodded to the volunteer, then looked back at him. I hope your panel goes well. It was polite. It was distant. It left no door open by accident. As she walked toward room C, 2 people moved aside to let her pass, and one of them asked if she had time after the session to review a relocation clause. Callahan stood beside the registration table holding an agenda that suddenly felt outdated in his hand. For the first time, he understood that Soraya had not disappeared from his life. She had stepped into the part of the world where her work had always belonged, and he was the one standing outside the room without the right badge. The divorce papers were signed on a Tuesday morning in a law office with beige carpet, bad coffee, and a copier that jammed twice before the final packet was ready. Callahan arrived 10 minutes early. Soraya arrived exactly on time, carrying a folder labeled Vennett Urban Strategies and the old anniversary card in a plain envelope. Their attorneys handled most of the talking. Property division, non-disparagement, trust authority, transition language for the foundry yard. It all sounded clean in legal sentences, which made the damage feel almost ordinary. When the last signature was done, Callahan kept his pen in his hand longer than necessary. I am sorry, he said. Not loud, not polished, just tired. Soraya looked at him and believed that he meant it, which did not change what it had cost her to survive him. I know, she said. He looked toward the envelope. What is that? She slid it across the conference table. Inside was the wedding ring, still tucked into the blank anniversary card she had never given him. I do not want to keep something I had to remove to remember myself. Callahan opened his mouth, then closed it. For once, he did not try to manage the moment. Outside, her phone buzzed with a calendar reminder. Tenant Protection Review, Room 214, 11:30 a.m. Devika had brought 2 other small business owners this time, and the grocery cooperative had asked Soraya to lead the negotiation. It was not glamorous. It was work. Paid work. Work with her name on the agreement and her terms in the margins. Callahan walked her to the elevator because there was nothing left to perform and no cameras to impress. Could we ever talk without lawyers? He asked. Soraya pressed the down button. She could have been cruel. Part of her wanted to be. Instead, she gave him the truth in the smallest shape she could manage. Maybe one day, not as your wife. The elevator opened. She stepped inside before his face could ask for more than she was willing to give. At the conference center, room 214 smelled like dry erase. Markers and takeout coffee. Soraya set her laptop on the table, signed her name on the attendance sheet, and watched the ink settle into the paper. No borrowed name. No missing credit. Just Soraya Vennett, written by her own hand, at the start of a meeting she had chosen. If you were Soraya, standing in that small conference room with your own name on the attendance sheet, could you hand back the ring and still wish the person well, without giving them another piece of yourself? Some endings do not look dramatic from the outside. They look like a signed document, a closed elevator door, and a meeting you choose to walk into. Share where you are listening from, especially if you have ever had to choose peace over being understood.